Hello, this is National Chess Master All Rats. I'm here at chess.com. I'm going to analyze a game played between Acorn 49 and Frosch, and this was played in on a turn-based game, 3 days per move. So we can assume with the high ratings we see that the players are going to have extensive notes on this game and have played very good and mostly precise moves. And I'll offer what I can. Obviously, I won't be able to say as much as the players saw in this game, but in the approximately 15 minutes this video lasts, hopefully I can share a number of things that will enlighten you. Okay, the Benoni defense, and black chooses the Benko Gambit, and I'm glad to see one of these. I don't think I've had a video on this one yet. So I've got some interesting lines for white to try here. If you're afraid of the Benko, first just a little background. I don't know how many of you have read Benko's original book on this, published back in the 1970s. It's a classic. Obviously, theory has changed a lot since then. I'm not going to discuss theory. I don't know where theory is today, but I can show you a few things that were popping up some 30 years ago to combat the Benko. I don't know how they hold up today, but I know the ideas behind them. You know, we're not so concerned with precise variations, exactly how someone should play, because your opponent's probably not going to know the book line. But if you know the ideas behind them, then you've got some great chances. Okay, first move to decline this gambit. Okay, we'll talk about accepting it in a minute, because that's what happens, is A4. Now, black has some choices. If he just sits there and does nothing, white's going to collect that pawn on B5, and black can still kind of play Benko Gambit style, but he's not going to be in something he really wants. And then white's got an open A file, which he doesn't have in a normal Benko Gambit. So suddenly black has little competition on that. So basically black has two choices, main choices here that I'll discuss. There could be other moves, but they're B4 and taking on C4. Okay, what to do against both of those? Well, white plays very similarly against either, so I'll just show one line. Let's show taking the pawn, which I believe is the better of the two choices, because if black locks up the queen side, then all the action happens on the king side, and white has a space advantage there. And let's just show you the way this continues. Okay, what should white do now? Now white has to stop and collect this pawn, and he will do it in his own way, and black really can't hope to hold on to it. So black should basically just go in and play his normal Benko style moves, fianchetto the dark squared bishop and so forth, and then E4, G6, and then white goes in and collects his pawn back. Okay, now at this point, what's going to happen is what white should probably play for at some point. He can do it right now. He doesn't have to. There's plenty of ways to play it, but at some point, white wants to play F4. The idea of playing F4 is to seize a little more space in this position while it's available, and continue the development, get castled, and eventually force in pawn to E5. This is the basic strategy that black wants to employ, or white wants to employ. What can black do? Well, black can just get his development as active as he can, try and utilize the half-open B file, and set up his pieces so that if white tries a pawn assault on E5, that black is able to defend against it and maintain an even game. So this gets black out of his basic Benko. It's still, theory says it's still even. However, it's not exactly what black's looking for when he opts to play a Benko Gambit. So it's certainly there for your consideration and self-study. Okay, so let's get back to the main position of the Benko, and when white accepts the Gambit. Okay, and let's continue from there. I want to show you one other line. Okay. It doesn't matter that black delays to take that pawn on A6. He's going to take it anyway. See, he takes it there. Now, okay, aside from G3, that's what white played. There's a move that a FIDE master friend of mine was showing us 30 years ago, and another FIDE master I know, somebody sprang it on him and got this really great game, and my opponent had stopped playing D4. He was okay, let me back up. We got two FIDE masters. One used to play the Benko Gambit as white, or as black, but he stopped playing D4. He was a D4 player. He stopped playing the D4 because of the Benko Gambit. And he started switching to E4 because he was convinced that the Benko Gambit was everything that it was cracked up to be, that black could get this great game from it. And he didn't like defending against his favorite opening. So another FIDE master suggested this line to an expert player who played it against him and got a great game against this FIDE master. And he said, "My God, now I can start playing D4 again, and I'm going to use this system." So I worked up a defense to it, which I can't remember right off the top of my head. At some point, what it involves white playing, and darn if I can remember exactly, but white's going to push for F4. And it's similar in concept to what you just saw on the other line. White's going to play for an E4, knight F3, and so forth setup, and eventually break with E5 at his point, at the right point. So I think it's F4 immediately. And just to show you, just a sample what goes on here. The knight comes out to F3, and the bishop comes out, and so forth. And white can do the castle by hand maneuver here if he wants. He can play E4 and take on F1 with his king, or he can stop and if he really wants, fianchetto the bishop. But there's nothing wrong with E4 and castling by hand. Okay, takes, and you can even take with the rook here and swing the king over with due preparation. But this is the basic idea. You get this set up, and theoretically white has good chances, and black's not in exactly what he wants. And you'll have to work on this on your own. I don't know what theory says on it. I don't even know what theory says on the Benko today. And that's not important because I'm not playing the Benko, and I'm not playing D4, so I don't run into it. Why do I need to spend my time learning it? I can just send you to the books and let you look it up if you're going to play the Benko or allow it to be played against you. Okay, so let's get to the gist of this game, which is a very intense game. And got to get to the right point here. He's on the PGN. Bishop takes A6, and then G3. Okay, here we go. Now, I looked up book on this too, just to see when it left theory, and I think it stayed for a while into opening theory. And I'm just kind of running through the moves here. If it's book, I'm sorry if I'm going fast, but if it's book, then it's been played before. Now, is Bishop C1 book? Have we gone out of book? This just seems like a peculiar move. The bishop has gone and developed, and then it undeveloped itself. And a lot of times white has trouble developing that piece in this opening, and now he's brought it out and brought it back. But at the same time, he's caused black to displace his knight over on the wing. But then again, at the same time, that knight on the wing has opened up the diagonal for the bishop on G7. Now, generally speaking, that knight that's sitting on H5, it goes to D7, supporting B6, and often black will push C4 in this position, and that knight finds a new square, C5. And there's all kinds of interesting ways to play the Benko, but essentially the lines are drawn. Black has two open files that he wants to operate on, and black wants to do that, and white wants to sit there and hold on to his extra pawn and convert it. And obviously theory says that's a whole challenge, because the verdict is still out. If properly played, I guess the game would end in a draw, but if one side can play their strategy a little bit better than the other, either side's capable of winning. And being a correspondence game, theoretically you'd say, well, if you're a pawn up, you should win the game. You have the chance to research the books, to find the good moves. But I guess it still speaks for the validity of the opening that white doesn't get a winning position here. Black actually has a very, very nice game, and we will see as it progresses. Okay, so now the knight goes back, and what's black gained out of it? Well, he's got his pawn up to H6 as a result. He's kept that square away from the white bishop. Okay, now white goes with his E4 move to get some space in the center, and now black starts maneuvering the knight where it belongs. And maybe this was the point it left book. This just seems like an odd move, but what does that bishop do? It doesn't really have a great future. Maybe it's good to just exchange it off for a knight before that knight gets into C5, like I was saying. Is this what white's plan is? if it goes to f1 to trade off, to try to trade off, then that just opens up lines for black. So the dark squared bishop is white's better bishop, but it's undeveloped. So, but it's on the opposite color of these center pawns that are for the moment locked. So there is some logic to playing bishop h3 if you follow up by exchanging it. But he didn't exchange it. So let's see what happens. Okay. So from this point on, as the middle game ensues, black just has a nice little initiative on the queen side. His pieces are active. White is having to sit and defend at every turn and try to wiggle out of this. And at any moment, this whole game can blow up on white. So if you're an advocate of active play and playing with a development advantage and space advantage and strategies, the Benko Gambit is perfect for you. You know, you're down a pawn, but so what? You know, you've got play, and just like any opening, if it's played correctly, it's good enough for a draw. But the bonus is that you have the active play. Okay, so there are a lot of strategies of the Benko where white plays a4 and tries to set up some kind of a blockade, usually on b5, so this is often seen. The drawback with it is that the pawn does get advanced and could be surrounded and captured. It does create a hole on b3 and weakens that square at the same time. So black's got certainly has active play against it, and we'll see how play progresses. Again, you know, that we have to give the players credit that they've analyzed this thing deeply, and there's really not much other than excellent play on both sides, because neither side's able to get any decisive advantage out of it. It's just that black has this lasting initiative. Black is always better in this game, and now he takes it off. So the maneuver finally happened. He instead of taking the knight on d7 like earlier, he's taking the knight on c4. Now, for what it's worth, though, black has the bishop pair, and taking on c4 did activate that bishop on a6 a little bit, and now it's threatened to park itself on b3. You know, as I said, there's a hole there, and white covers that square. This is again a maneuver seen in the a4 plans against the Benko, to put the rook on a3 to try to batten down the hatches. But look, black's just getting all this active play, and now we got to be careful. There's all kinds of discover possibilities. So black retreats the queen, puts on a useful square. It's supporting the bishop and pressuring that diagonal, and white takes the moment to advance his pawn a little further. But even though it's advanced a little further, it's a little weaker, and the queen's not a great blockader, but it's doing its work. And now black says, well, you know what, I'm going to hit b2. I've got two targets, a5 and b2. I'm going to switch to b2 and see what you do. And white retreats his queen. And there's obviously some tactical motives here. You're threatening on h7. You're going to give up b2 and take back h7. I'm sure that's the idea, because black guards this way. And like I say, black's had this persistent initiative, and white's just not able to find a good plan. He's finally got his pieces all developed, but they're on the defensive, and everything black has is active. Even the knight on d7 is standing nearby, ready to jump in. It could get into e5 at any moment, and white's sitting there kind of passive. His pieces are all defending things. The rook on a3 is defending the pawn on a5, and everything else you can see. White has no open lines to operate on, so black is doing quite well here. And now this allows a tactic which black finds, which increases his slight advantage, and here it goes. And now black has to deal with the threat on f7. So let's see, could he have taken? No, he can't take on f7 with check, because the bishop, which just took a piece, comes back. So black's got that f7 menace covered, and now temper with check. Now deal with f7. So black has regained his pawn, and at the same time he still has a very nice position. His pieces are active, and white's got a silly looking knight on e1 that's not really threatening to go anywhere and do any damage. His knight on c3 is defending a couple of pawns in the center. The rook on a3 is okay, but it's supporting a passed pawn. But White really doesn't have much play here. Black's still doing fine. His initiative is still there, and White retreats. And like I say, Black just continues the pressure, improving his position. And White needs to do something, anything, get some kind of possible counterplay on the king side against the king. And this weakens the king position a little bit, but it has a motive to it. It's going to anchor a knight in on g4. And now we start getting into some crazy tactics here that I was looking at, and I'm sure that Black was well aware of them, and probably White too, because you're going to wonder about a position here in a moment, and you'll see it. Okay, now here Black starts slowly improving his position. Now White wants to get rid of that bishop, so it comes back. We're not quite where we want to be yet, but Black just keeps squeezing, keeps finding entry points for his pieces. And here's the point. Extremely good move, and it had to be well calculated, because if you're just looking at this, you're going to say, well, gosh, you're not really threatening anything yet, and you're just allowing that pawn to run. If I'm White, I'm going to play a6, and if you don't do anything else, I'm going to play a7. And if my pawn gets to h7, I've got a queen, and you're going to have to give something up for it. But so I was looking at, well, what happens? What can what can Black do? And I'll just show you. It's rather fascinating. The line essentially goes, the queen comes into d4, and then you shove again, and then you bring this knight into play, and hey, we've got our queen. Wow, we're doing great. And I know this rook's hanging, but there's some tricks on it. Whoops, picked up the wrong piece. Okay, Black just takes this, and then watch this. This knight, the queen takes the rook, and the knight gives a discovery. You got to get out of check. You don't want to put the queen there, right? So move the king somewhere. Let's put him in the corner, and then Black just collects this back, and major threats. He's still down in exchange, but the knight on c3 is loose, and it's stopping a mate in one. Black's just crushing here, and there's more to it than I just showed. I just in the duration of this video, there's not really much else I can show. It's something that I'm sure both players were aware of during the game, and because I'm making a video, and somebody might ask a question, well, what about a6? And then, well, that's the reason. So White doesn't do that. He plays rook a4, and just continues keeping pressure on the White position. Now he gives this up, but he gets that rook, and now the pawn falls. So all this maneuvering is finally paid off. Black has won his pawn, and likely at this point has a winning position. He just didn't win it, as we will see. And where did he go wrong? Okay, knight f2. Now maybe it's time to give up the bishop. Can we put the queen on the same diagonal? If we put the queen on the same diagonal and let him take it, our queen gets a better square. Okay, maybe and then we're threatening from there to redeploy the bishop somewhere else. And anyway, what he did is back it up, but I guess White can still do what he did anyway. White starts breaking with e5, and like I said, back when White played f4, he's trying to generate any kind of activity, counterplay on the king side, and now finally here it comes, but he's down a pawn to do it. And rather than change the pawn structure, Black attempts to keep it symmetrical by saying, Black, you can trade. And here he's willing to accept a doubled pawn because it'll be a little power of strength here. Now this exchange helps White a little bit because it weakens f6. There's no longer a pawn covering that square, and we'll see why in a moment. Okay, this is the point where I believe that White earned his draw. What Black needs to do is just play f6 and cut off all the threats on that diagonal. Instead, he took on f2 with his knight, and then White suddenly has all these menacing threats, and the king can't really go to g8 because then knight f6 check, and you can't stay on h8, you get a repetition, And if you go to f8, there's all kinds of just more checks with this knight. This knight just becomes this major threat. It's something to analyze on your own. So black plays king f8, and it's pretty much assured that white's going to draw this. He could even stop and take the knight first, and if king e7, queen f6 check is coming, black's going to draw. White's going to draw this, and they just find a repetition here of a couple more moves and agree to a draw. So after the bishop a6 may have been a faulty strategy. Putting the bishop back there didn't do much. I'm not saying my move is an improvement or not. And then trying f6 instead of taking on f2, that's a possibility. Something for white to look a little deeper and see if you can figure this out. But it's an extremely high-level game, and this video just went 21 minutes, and hopefully I did this game some kind of justice. Very good game by black. Good resources by white. Thanks for your time, for stopping to look. Take care. Be back soon with another one. Bye.